special honor. I feel so privileged, so honored to be able to introduce our keynote at this conference. President Professor Agar, who will be giving us a lecture today on topic on the Sea of Islands continent, cross-cultural enhancement. For some people, Prof Agar needs no introduction, but then I will still do the all the same. Both for those of us who live in. All right, so Professor Nicholas Agar is a philosopher at the University of Waikato, where he specializes in ethics of emerging technologies and human future. He is one of New Zealand's most widely published philosophers, with books exploring the promises and perils of human enhancement, artificial intelligence, and genetic. His work has been translated into multiple languages and has influenced international debates about how societies should respond to rapid technological change. Professor Agar brings philosophical and ethical analysis that connects these questions with global conversations about humanity's future. So, Professor Agar, we are so delighted to join this call, this conference. You're ready, Royce.
So thank you. So at this point I ask, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. And just, this is a co-authored paper, so he also has with him Professor Leilani Tuala-Warren, who is the current dean of the Peringa Faculty of Law at the University of Waikato, and is the first dean of law of Pacific descent in Aotearoa, as well as the first Pacific woman to be a professor of law in Aotearoa. Her career has spanned various roles, including serving as a state solicitor, a lawyer in private practice, and the first executive director of the Samoa Law Reform Commission. She was the first family court and family violence court judge in Samoa in 2013, and the second woman to be appointed in a justice of the Supreme Court in Samoa in 2016, a role she held until 2023. She continues to hold a temporary warrant as a justice in the Supreme Court of Samoa. In recognition of her achievements, she was awarded the University of Waikato's Distinguished Alumni Award in August 2022, and she has been appointed a member of the Waitangi Tribunal, and is the first person of Pacific descent to be appointed to the tribunal. I hope I got some of those pronunciations correct.
Thank you. So that was brilliantly done.
I'm so delighted to have both of you for this presentation and to be gracious enough to both appear and give us a lecture. So please, questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's lovely to speak to you. And so this really paper grows out of a collaborative arrangement between Leilani and me. We bring different perspectives, and we found since I came to Waikato, I've really loved, working with Leilani, and so we broadened each other's thinking, and so it reminded me. I read a volume, a collection of African essays on transhumanism. And I found the ideas in that volume so exciting and different. And I thought, that's exactly what the world needs. And having read that, I went and chatted with Leilani. So I'm a philosopher. Leilani is a legal academic. But we were able to have a conversation about a topic that I've written far too much on. And Leilani, she's written lots on other things, but nothing on that. But we were able to this paper is basically a story about that collaboration and these different ideas. So if I can just sort of, in a way, provide some of the framing around it and explain why I found in reading that volume of African writings on transhumanism, where you get a different starting point and a different steering. You get a distinctively different human take on what it is to be radically enhanced, to have enhancement techs added to your minds and bodies, and that's exactly what we need. So we need those different perspectives, and we need, I'm not African, but I need African perspectives. I'm not Pacifica. I need Pacific perspectives. They are human perspectives. And it's the wonderful thing about, wouldn't it be a disaster if we changed in ways that we couldn't understand each other? Because to think that that's not possible, well, it's possible. But that's why, in a way, before we choose to apply the most economically advantageous sort of model of human enhancement, we've got to be aware that we might blot out different voices on good ways for humanity to be. And in actual fact, the collaboration between me and Leilani has been about her introducing these unfamiliar ideas for me and me to think, wow, I can use that. I can understand it because I'm human. We're both human. And that's when I hear about concepts like Ubuntu, I think Ubuntu, what does that mean for enhancement? What does that look? And that's what I found so exciting about that volume. It's all these explorations that were totally unfamiliar to me. But when I looked at them, in a way, familiar because they're human perspectives. And it's a disaster when a narrow section of humanity gets to make all the choices that then get imposed on everyone. So I guess there's sort of a bit of framing that I will provide, is that it's sort of, in my view, this is kind of offering imagination insurance about the future of humanity. So we have this, everyone's talking about AI and what AI can do and how AI can write philosophy papers that get published in journals. But the precious resource that we have are 8 billion imaginations that are sort of human imaginations, but different. And they see different things. And it's like for us to sort of proceed into the most economically advantageous future without African perspectives and without Pacific perspectives would be a disaster because we would choose the path that Elon Musk wants. And we know that he's a perfect marketer of tech. So whatever he wants, we'll probably, if we let it, we'll all end up with it. And so just chatting with Lani, it was like she had a perspective on what we would lose. And it was quite clear when I talked with Lani that she's interested in enhancement. She's never written on it as an academic topic. That's fine. I've done too much of that. But it was quite clear that she recognized she was able to think, well, these are the enhancement texts I might choose. And I was able, but I think it's part of people from Africa, from the continent, can look at the Sea of Islands perspective you're about to hear about and think, some of those we could use. So I'm going to hand over to Lani now, who's going to present. So she's like an enhancement neophyte. She's never written anything on a human enhancement debate. Well, we're hoping to write a paper for your volume in which we present this idea. So she will be joining the academic debate.
Oh, talofa lava and warm Pacific greetings to you all from the Sea of Islands in Oceania. Talofa lava is hello in Samoan. And I would like to just offer another perspective. And it is perspective from one of our Oceania professors, Professor Epeli Hawofo. And he wrote an essay in 1993 called Our Sea of Islands. And I want to offer this perspective because I think it celebrates waves of creative energy. So Oceania is a region, as you probably know, of indigenous cultures, often belittled since early days of interaction with Europeans. And when the Christian missionaries came, they condemned Oceania cultures as barbaric and savage. However, the people of Oceania, the people of the Pacific, have much to offer. And it is this offering that we say we may lose with advances in human enhancement technology, which belittles indigenous cultures and do not incorporate our worldview. So what do we offer the world, or what do we offer your continent? What do our small, poor, and isolated island nations have to offer? Well, when viewed by Western nations, we are in physical as well as mental reservations, and we should be confined to those reservations. And if, based on land surfaces, outsiders will see us as tiny or small. However, we don't conceive of our world in such microscopic proportions. Our myths, our legends, and oral traditions means our universe is comprised not only of land surfaces, but the surrounding ocean, the rumbling earth below, and heavens above, with hierarchies of powerful gods and named stars and constellations that people could count on to guide us across the seas. So our world is anything but tiny. We think big, and we recount our deeds in quite epic proportions. So our ancestors became mountains, and they swam thousands of miles. They shot arrows at the moon, and they conquered volcanoes. So there is a gulf of difference between viewing the Pacific as islands in a far sea, which is how outsiders view us, and as a sea of islands. Now, islands in a far sea emphasizes dry surfaces in a vast ocean, far from centers of power and wealth. And this focus stresses smallness and remoteness of the islands. Europeans drew imaginary lines across the sea, making colonial boundaries and confining people to tiny spaces. And those boundaries today define the island nations of the Pacific. But seeing the Pacific as a sea of islands is a more realistic perspective in which things are seen in the totality of our relationships. So our ancestors who lived in the Pacific for over 2,000 years viewed the large sea as places to explore, to make their homes in, to breed generations of seafarers like themselves. They were at home with the sea, and they developed great skills for navigating their waters and the large gaps between island groups. So theirs was a large world in which peoples and cultures moved and mingled, uninhibited by boundaries of a kind erected much later by the imperial powers. So they sailed to trade, to marry, to visit relatives, have adventures, and sometimes to fight and dominate. And we are guardians of the world's largest, with the world's largest of all life-giving oceans, because it has been our home for generations. And the future lies in our own people and not in those who would prescribe for us or keep us ever dependent. So we must ask what any advancement in technology will do for us. Will it help us in our struggle with climate change? Will you even believe us when we tell you that we're experiencing a climate crisis? So the people of Oceania are not adverse to technology. From New Zealand to the United States, technology has helped us to expand our universe. And our universe is kept strong by this notion of talanoa, which is just a process of sharing and exchanging knowledge and ideas with each other by a simple process of talking, like we're doing now. Now, Talanoa is kept alive through advances in technology, mobile phones, video calls between people of Oceania who have settled across the globe. We must be allowed to cultivate our ever-growing universe in our own ways. Wherever our people are, that is our universe. And Oceania is expanding. We are the ocean, we are the sea. We must not be confined again to tiny spaces and must not allow anyone to take our freedom away. So whatever technology is being developed, there is reason to pause, not reject, and ask, what do the people of Oceania lose? Can the people of Oceania afford it? Will it take away our oral traditions, our thinking, our talanoa, which once long ago enabled us to use the stars, the sun, wind, and waves to navigate our way to and around the Sea of Islands? So what will become of our creative energy? Will it confine us to mental and physical reservations again? So if you accept that definition of smallness, then you ignore our contribution or Oceania's contribution to the wider world.
Yes, so I've always, the conversations that Lani and I have involve kind of trying to understand, from my perspective, that story and what that would mean. Because I always think we would love for a piece that we would write for a volume to look at, I mean, to consider an example, like if Elon Musk says, I can give you a neuroprosthetic, a cybernetic implant that will enable you to connect to Starlink satellites and to always tell you exactly where you are in the world precisely. So that seems like a straightforward radical enhancement. I've written quite a lot about radical enhancement. I mean, in a way, that's an ability that none of us currently have. That satisfies the definition of radical enhancement. But talking to Lani, it's amazing it's like, people talk about Hegel as being a dynamical thinker. So there's always, it's not a static philosophy. And it's quite clear that when I talk philosophically with Leilani, she's a dynamical thinker because it's always in motion. There's always motion. And I wonder about, so there's a mystery, and a mystery that's not well understood from outside of the Sea of Islands, about how all of these massively distant and scattered islands were occupied by people who didn't have the technology that the Europeans had. They found a way. They worked out how to, and they actually, it wasn't a mistake where they got hit by a storm and then somehow ended up lost, but they ended up, they did it. And it's like, so when you look at an enhancement, any enhancement has trade-offs, and you've always got to ask what you lose. So what about sort of the dynamical way that Pacifica philosophers think would be lost if we accept and unthinkingly accept whatever tech Elon Musk wants to sell to us to put into our brains? Well, I think in terms of imagination insurance, we would lose a capacity to think different thoughts and to imagine different things, which may prove essential. So this is not an anti-enhancement thing. This is not bioconservative, we reject enhancement. It's not enthusiastic frothing at the mouth transhumanism. We love all enhancement. It's what enhancements would promote that dynamical thinking. I'm sure there are many, and which might harm it. So yes, we've just had the light switch up there, and we will wait. We'll do some motion. So I said that Lani was quite dynamical so it's quite late at night here, and so that's why that turned off. But thank you. We're ready to take questions if you have any.
Professor Agar and Professor Leilani. This very laid back but insightful talk. So happy to hear both of you, and we're happy to also learn some concepts from Samoa, the beautiful island, and some indigenous ideas that could also complement or engage the whole notion of human enhancement. So we know it's late over there, so I don't know if you stay up late working or it's time to go to bed, but whatever you can, we will take questions for you before we go to the earlier speaker.